I have a confession. It's a big one, and I'm a little bit ashamed about it. Even though podcasting has literally been my business for years, and I have literal decades of experience in it, this show has been way harder to produce than I expected. Now, I am doing it all myself. I'm not trying to be a martyr here or anything. I'm a perfectionist, and I've chosen that path for myself, but it has been a challenge. I mean, here we are, episode 4, and I've let more time pass between this and the first 3 than I would ever advise clients to do. And there are moments, a lot of them, where the workload has felt bigger than the available hours. So when today's guest acknowledged that she is also not hitting all of her marks despite having been doing this for nearly 300 episodes, it was sort of a sigh of relief and permission to be like, okay, Courtney, you're not perfect. You're not going to hit all of the perfect marks that you've set for yourself and your clients. It's been very comforting, and it's a reminder that it's progress, not perfection. And I don't remember who said it, but I think it was somebody not great. But the quote remains, 90% of success depends on just showing up. Podcasting is absolutely not about perfectly following a rule book. It's about building something meaningful and sustainable over time. Rules and frameworks are helpful, but they should function as guidelines for you to work within and color in the way that makes sense to you. They're not straitjackets, although sometimes over the past week I have felt like I've needed one. But I've really appreciated hearing from today's guest that even she is putting in weekend time that she's not proud of and has let a few deadlines slip and has not met release dates as regularly as she would like. Today I have Katie Fogarty, host of the long-running podcast A Certain Age, which is a show focused on midlife, reinvention, and living well in the second half of life. And over the past 5 years, she has produced, like I said, more than 270 episodes. She's interviewed best-selling authors, leading doctors, cultural voices, and built a podcast that has grown into an unexpected business. Along the way, she also launched a second show, which boggles the mind more than ever now that I'm just in my own first. It's called the Midlife Book Club. I guess for some of us, one niche podcast is not enough. She is a marvel and very real about what it takes to make a podcast that lasts and why sustainability matters far more than the perfect sound I'm constantly trying to achieve with this show. Here is my conversation with host of A Certain Age and Midlife Book Club, Katie Fogarty. Katie Fogarty, you're an amazing podcaster who has 2, but where did it all start and why podcasting and what part does it play in your business and your life?
Courtney, I'm so excited for this conversation because I could talk podcasting all day long. And the fact that I get to hang out with another podcaster just lights me up. So this is going to be a fantastic conversation. I have 2 shows, which sometimes I kick myself. My main podcast is A Certain Age. That show is 5 years old, 270 episodes. I'm part of a small podcast network. I have interviewed New York Times bestselling authors, top doctors, brand builders. I interviewed the former First Lady of Canada, Sophie Trudeau, which was like a pinch me moment. Other big OGs like Stacey London. It's just been an absolute blast. It's given me community. It's given me an unexpected business. I'm sure we'll get into that. How the show got monetized surprised me, quite frankly. And I love podcasting so much. I launched a secondary podcast, the Midlife Book Club, probably around year 3. And I did that really for 2 reasons. I could talk to authors all day long. I love talking to writers. But I know that the women who listen to my show are really into prescriptive shows. They love hearing from doctors. They love hearing from pelvic floor experts and bone health and managing adult children and empty nesting. So I couldn't do authors every single week, even though that's, my mom's a librarian. I adore books. So I thought, let me peel off some of the literary content and move it into its own separate show. And that's the Midlife Book Club. And that show really books that help spotlight midlife voices and storytellers in a different way. So I feel like the 2 shows really work hand in hand. A Certain Age is my main show. It's every single Monday. I do anywhere from 50 to 48 shows a year on that. And the Midlife Book Club is once a month. And I'm going to be honest, I have not kept up with it the way I had intended to. did 9 shows, and then I took a little bit of a break, and I need to get myself back into it, and we can also talk about that as well.
Okay, good. So this whole podcast is kind of a meta experiment. I'm trying to teach people how to build podcasts, mostly entrepreneurs and people with a mission to bring podcasts into their content mix without burning themselves out. I'll tell you, I have only released 3 episodes. I'm already feeling like I'm burning out. And you admitted your second podcast is hard to sustain, but also your how many episodes? How did you find your rhythms? And do you have help? Like, how do you do it?
Yeah, it's so important to really peel back the layers because it can feel mysterious. So when I launched A Certain Age 5 years ago, I hired a sound engineer. For 3 years, I recorded at his studio in a beautiful pod booth, and I had this amazing, talented man on the other side of the glass window helping me. And basically, I would walk out of there with almost a finished audio file. He would edit in the room. If something went sideways, we would restart again. He'd pick it right back up. So I walked out with almost a finished product. He did some finishing and some other small tweaks after we were done. I would have an audio file back in a day or two. So that was incredibly helpful to have that level of support. What I did not have support with was anything else. So I had to find the guests, I had to do the reading, I had to write the scripts, I had to come up with the Q&A, I had to do the research. And then I would also handle all of the distribution, putting it up on a platform, which is not hard to do, but then promoting it, which is where the work really comes in. How do you create the social assets? How do you put it out there? And it took me a little while to pick up a rhythm, but then I did. So I have sort of a standard suite of social assets that come out. I've pre-created them. I know what they are. I simply have to populate them. And when I say simple, it still takes time. Everything takes time. And people often ask me, do you read all the books? Because that seems like a deal breaker, but I do. Like, I love to read. So when I said my mom was a librarian, my living room was arranged by the Dewey Decimal System growing up. So even if I can't finish a book before a show, I always finish it afterwards. Like, I love to read. So it's a ton of work. I would say it takes me anywhere from 10 to 15 hours to get a show out every week in terms of reading, preparing, doing all that stuff, posting it, putting it out in a newsletter every Thursday, posting it on LinkedIn, creating the show notes, all of that. I did have help with initially was a wonderful freelance French editor a transcript editor who would do my transcripts. This was during the pandemic. She was biking all around Europe and sleeping in tents and then posting the transcript to me when she was on McDonald's Wi-Fi.
Oh my God.
Every once in a while, she'd get back to me. She's like, I'm so sorry. They closed the doors before I could get in there and use their Wi-Fi. It was hysterical. But it was great to have that help. Eventually, I turned over the podcast transcript editing after she moved on to a different role, a more permanent role that did not involve tents and free Wi-Fi. My kids wound up picking up the transcript editing. I have kids who are now 25 and 23, but at the time they were still in college looking to make some extra money, and they would edit and clean up the transcripts for me. Now I have AI doing that. So I have AI doing the transcripts for me. The transcripts are created, but when they come out of Otter AI where I transcribe them, they're still kind of a mess. And I use Claude AI to clean them up and reformat them. It's incredible. So I do have that help. Now I have a sound engineer who is freelance. I record in Riverside, and the editing is done by a wonderful husband and wife editing team called Sound Advice Strategies, and they help with that. But all the other stuff I'm still doing on my own.
So is it a full-time job? It sure sounds like it.
I actually have another job. So I run a career communications consultancy called the Reboot Group, and I work with senior executives and business owners to help them shape and share powerful professional stories, either on LinkedIn or bios and communications. I lead communications workshops at companies. So that is my other part of my day job. So I would say, and I'm always very candid about this, I work 7 days a week. And I do not mean to glamorize this. This is not like hustle harder and it's so glamorous to be constantly working. I don't think it's glamorous to be constantly working, but I do. So I have 2 things that I'm really committed to that I love, and I can only do it if I'm willing. It's not that I'm working like 9 to 5 every single day, but I will dip in and out of the work that needs to get done on a Saturday, on a Sunday. I'm up early, up late. I know I shouldn't be admitting this, that we're supposed to be having boundaries in our personal and work lives, but
I love the honesty, personally.
this is what it takes for me, at least, to get it done. And sometimes I'm tearing my hair out and thinking, like, what in God's name am I doing? And other times, like, I remind myself, like, I get to do this. I am choosing to have these podcasts. I am choosing to create a second podcast that I feel guilty about because it's like,
Neglected a little bit.
It's not being neglected. It's like my half-dead houseplant. But My other show is my major focus, and that I am very religious about tending properly.
No, I hear you on that, and I also have a half-dead houseplant and take time on Saturdays and Sundays, and it's funny because I am really an advocate. When I worked at Spotify, I was adamant, like, they do not pay me to build their brand on Saturdays and Sundays, so I don't. But I like to build my own brand and support the things that I've chosen to do, and I try to instill that in my kids. I have 2 daughters. It was heartbreaking to them when I got laid off from Spotify, the super cool brand, and then I was like, I can help them learn a different story, which is you get to decide. You use the words "you get to," not "have to do this." Anyway, since my main audience for this are people who are like, "Can I do this?" And I appreciate your sharing how much work it really is. I have developed frameworks that help fend off burnout. The statistics for women, especially women around our age, because I know you're a certain age and I am, is
56. I'm proudly
oh, girl, I
56.
know. I love saying it out loud too. I love on your cover art, it says age out loud, right? Anyway, I'm 52 next week. All to say, we are the demographic that burns out quickest. We succumb to pod fade, and I'm on a mission to help women do what you're doing. And so I'm here to get all the secrets. And one of them is, what do you say to people who are just starting out, what they should take on? Because it hasn't yet earned its keep. And we'll get to ROI. I want to know what ROI looks like for you. But for me personally, I'm kind of glad I'm DIYing a lot of this to start so that I know when I'm hiring someone what it takes to make this kind of social asset, or what good editing looks like and sounds like. Say to me what people should take on or immediately not, in your opinion.
Anytime somebody says to me, I want to launch a podcast, I say, go for it. The podcasting is incredibly fun. It has opened my professional network and also introduced me to some really dear friends that I've created in the 5 years I've been doing the show and have been active in the midlife storytelling space. So I cannot stress how wonderfully enriching and joyful and amazing an experience it is. I also am very honest with people. It is a shit ton of work. And it is slow to monetize unless you have wild success out of the gate. So when people say to me, like, I ask them, why do you want to launch a podcast? And sometimes they'll say, I'm looking for a new revenue stream. And I will say, this podcast will cost you money for a while. Even if you're DIYing everything and you're not hiring an editor or a sound engineer and you're doing it all yourself and you're doing every single bit of it yourself, there's still opportunity costs because you're spending your time not earning income, not earning revenue. So I just want to be clear
Yeah.
about that. It takes a long time to scale. Having said that, I think that people can launch a podcast and use it to drive potential revenue toward their other business. My two businesses are not really linked. People are not coming on the podcast. They're coming on the podcast for how to thrive in midlife, dealing with pelvic floor issues and menopause and reinvention and purpose and just fun and relationship advice. My lifestyle and wellness content performs the best. My career content typically doesn't perform that well, even though that's my day job. So I'm not using it to drive people towards my services, which I think that people can do. So if somebody wants to launch a podcast to say, look, I've got a certain set of expertise, I want to communicate about it, you can use it as a lead generation funnel. In fact, you should. You should think of it that way. So I think it really all depends upon why people are hopping in the podcast arena to begin with.
Was your end goal to monetize and make this a revenue stream?
100% no. 100% no. I launched this podcast to have fun. And I've told this story a couple of times. So I launched it during the pandemic. I was sheltering in place with everyone I gave birth to and my husband. And I was like, we have run out of dinner time conversation. I cannot keep doing this. I miss hanging out with women. I miss being in rooms and like feeling lit up and energized by just being in the company of other women. So I launched the podcast to just sort of reconnect with people during a time when the world felt really closed. I launched the podcast to have fun, to reconnect with people. And one of my dear friends, who is one of the country's biggest leadership coaches, said to me, what's your desired outcome? And I was like, desired outcome? That sounds so formal. I'm like, to have fun. And she was like, no, you need to think bigger. I'm like, I do? Like, I didn't have any intention other than just to experiment and have creative fun in this different kind of communication tool that I've never used before. Because my background's in journalism. I've written the morning news. I worked in PR firms. I have been doing professional storytelling for executive clients for a long time. I've done all different types of storytelling, and I was really intrigued by podcasting and had never tried it. So fast forward, let me zoom forward on episode 6. And I got an inbound sponsor request from a big menopause care company to say, we want to sponsor 16 shows. And I almost fell off my chair because I was on episode 6 and I was like, oh my God, I guess I have to keep going. I've got to make 16 more of these things. And by episode 12, I loved it. And I also thought, wow, this was incredible. Like somebody walked in my door and wanted to advertise. P.S. That never happened again. Every
Mm.
other sponsor I had to get, like for those first bunch of years, I had to go after them. It was not as easy to get sponsors as I originally had thought. Although we can talk a little bit more about sponsorship. I think when you have a fairly niche audience like mine, it can be a little bit easier, even when you are smaller and don't have some of the numbers of the bigger shows.
So much here, and we share so much background. I was in journalism as well when I worked at Audible, which really trained me to care about sound design, things that you hired. I've been thinking a lot lately about how you have to spend money to make money. Do you think that those investments that you made help contribute to sponsors inbound? Because sometimes people think those things are not necessary. Like, I can wing it. People don't care about sound quality. Tell me what you think about that.
I have two sort of schools of thought on this. One, for me personally, investing money with a professional and really it made me feel committed. I'm like, I threw some money at this. I invested some money. I have to keep going. Right. So I had some great advice right out of the gate. I was lucky enough to spend times with a woman who was the former podcast head for Forbes magazine. She created and launched 6 podcasts for that magazine. And she said to me, commit to doing 12 weeks. And then if you get to the end of the 12 weeks, you're going to say, thanks so much for listening to season 1. I'll let you know when season 2 drops and then never come back. Just like never return. And I thought, I can do anything for 12 weeks. Let me go for this. And as I shared, by week 6, I had somebody knocking in my inbox saying, let's keep going to do 16 shows. So I do think that mindset around like investing money, putting that stake in the sand helped me keep going. I felt very supported. The sound engineer I worked with was fantastic. I felt less nervous about some of the technical stuff. It allowed me, I think, to be better right out of the gate because I had some, like an A-team support helping me make it happen. And I think for me, that was necessary. I don't know as to whether or not the sponsors came in because the sound quality was great. I do think that the part 2 to this is I do think the pandemic really did change the calculus around what people think is professional entertainment, sound, and audio. I mean, we all watch SNL over Zoom. By the way, that was lame, and we're glad they're back on real air because it's
Yes.
much better and much funnier. And we love seeing them on the soundstage. But pandemic did change how we are willing to receive information and consume entertainment and consume information. And I think Instagram has also broken that down. You're seeing the algorithm prognosticator saying less polished videos where it's at now. People don't want that shiny, perfect stuff. They just want something more raw and authentic. And I don't know if that's true or not, but I do recognize that I respond to that probably more strongly than I do something that feels really slick. So I don't think that you should let sound get in the way necessarily of you getting going, but I do think you have to be respectful to your listener. I mean, it can't be noisy or scratchy. Dogs, you can't have horrible audio. People don't want to put up with that, but it doesn't need to sound highly produced necessarily.
Yeah, it's funny. While you were saying that, I was thinking about the word authenticity, which is so overused, but also we all want it, right? But there's also manufactured authenticity. I don't have a sound engineer right now, but I have a belief that people subconsciously really do care about sound quality without knowing it. Like you described, it's jarring when it's crackly and overmodulated. Anyway, that's just my little geek out. But you mentioned the format evolution and how we are here in a Zoom-esque environment, whereas before we would have had to rent this studio like you had. This is my segue into format evolution and how you did a live show.
Oh, yeah.
And I love people playing with their formats and not just doing by rote what it is they think they're supposed to do. So tell me what brought that on, how you felt. Was it worth it? I'm all about ROI, the time, the effort, the energy. Are you glad you did it?
I love doing live podcast recording. And I thought to myself, what took me so long? So that would be a sort of piece of my coaching. I do think that when someone launches a show, if you're new out of the gate or you're in the first couple of months, I think it takes you 6 months to kind of really figure out what's working or not. Initially, my show, A Certain Age, was simply spotlighting women over 50 who had reinvented their midlife in some way. They were doing something wildly different. Like I featured actually an Audible executive who went on to become a playwright and a hospital administrator who launched a beauty brand, like big sort of transformations that they were doing in midlife. I very quickly realized that my audience also craved information about navigating midlife, what was hard and challenging. Like midlife is incredible and it's pop culture gets it wrong. We're excited to be here with our wisdom and our experience. We do not want to be 22 again. But we also have things that we're navigating that are challenging. Like all of a sudden, it's like I never thought about bone health in my 20s.
Mm,
Thank God. I was, it was like
boring.
not on my radar. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, what's a DEXA scan? And do I need to worry about osteoporosis and menopause? So I featured a lot of experts that. So I pivoted slightly the content of the show. So I would encourage a listener who wants to launch to be open to hearing and seeing what your listening audience cares about because you might be surprised and then you'll create content to serve them. So that's number one. Content might change. Two, I think I would say yes, change your format a little bit. I have not also done a solo episode yet. And solo episodes are on my list and I haven't gotten there. I finally had the opportunity to do a live podcast recording. It was an absolute blast. And for that, I actually did bring Dave Goldberg back, my original sound engineer, because he came in and did audio and video because I'm going to put it up on YouTube, which I haven't done either. So, lessons that I think I've learned 5 years in, if I were to encourage somebody now to get on a show, I would say I would think about doing audio and video right out of the gate.
Mm.
I did not do that. I polled my listening audience. They don't really want video, which makes sense to me because they've been my audio only listeners for 5 years. But there's probably a whole swath of people out there who prefer to consume their content also via video, and I'm not yet currently serving them. So I would say if you have the ability to do both, consider launching that way and then seeing where your listeners are coming from and then respond accordingly.
Okay, I love getting feedback from the listener and implementing it and pivoting. And that's the thing with podcasting is like I have to remind people it's not, magazines. You only have this many inches. It's kind of infinite, right? And so
Right.
if people want longer, if people want shorter, you can change it. You don't have to undo the printing press to do it. Let's talk about data and tracking and how we quantify or qualify success, shall we? There's the numbers we can look at on our dashboards, but do you actively solicit emails or comments? You mentioned changing the content according to did you just read the tea leaves of the numbers or did you actively solicit it? That kind of feedback.
I would say it was both. The tea leaves a little bit like where is the wind going? What am I interested in, basically? I mean, I am like an avatar for the audience. And I feel like a lot of what I'm interested in, the audience is interested in as well. I've had to push myself on that as well. Actually, I wound up at a women's health conference and there was a speaker on ADHD. And she said, please raise your hand if ADHD has touched your life. And every hand in the room but mine went up. And I thought, oh my God, I've been missing this. So it's sort of what you care about and what you're lit up at. But you also have to understand like, what does your audience care about? A mistake that I think a lot of podcasters make is think the show is about them. And some shows are. That's totally fine. If they're very personality driven shows, go for it. Like that makes a lot of sense. But mine's an interview format. And so I'm always very conscious that my job is to make the guest shine, to let her story be told, her expertise come out. I of course make references to things that are going on in my own life, but it's really for me, it's the opportunity for the guest to be giving the information to the audience. The audience is with me every week. They don't need to keep hearing my story over and over again. They're really here to meet an incredible woman who's going to give them information that they can then use to really supercharge what's going on in their own life.
It's funny because there's a tension there for me where I often say to my cohorts of people who are learning how to make a podcast, I'm a big adherent of Priya Parker's The Art of Gathering, and she's all about how to create an experience for the people you're serving. And I drive home to them, you're a host to your audience. You're also hosting your guest, but it's in service to your audience. And so how do you tackle topics that maybe don't touch your life, but are in the ether of the people that you serve? You bring your lens to it, and I see you already doing it, even in this conversation and in your interviews.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like I go into every conversation not just to help my guests shine, but like with curiosity. I mean, the reason why they're on their show. At one point, this is funny. One of my aunts listens to the show and she said, Katie, you like every book. I said, yeah, I do. She's like, do you really? And I said, of course. That's why they're on the show. The beautiful thing about having your own show, at least for me, is that I get to decide the content that goes on it. And so I'm spotlighting women that I think are incredible or interesting and that has something to share, something I want to learn about, something I don't know anything about, something that I'm hoping my audience will connect with as well. And that's why the person's there. I've been asked to have, you know this, when you have a podcast, people want to be on it, period, end of story. And so I'm on the receiving end of pitches all day, every day. And there are tons of people that don't make it through the filter because it's just, for whatever reason, I can't feature them. Either the content's too similar to something I've just done, or I feel like, you know what, there's a disconnect with the show. The ethos of the show is really to be age positive. Sometimes people come in like they want to talk about their anti-aging skin cream, and I'm like, record scratch. You're missing the point of the story. The point of the story is like aging is living. Let's just try to do it in a way that makes us feel great and feel good at the end of the day. So we say no lots of times, and I totally get it. Like we don't have to be the exact audience to have somebody on your show. Your experiences can be different, but at the end of the day, I just want to make sure that the listener feels that they are learning something. And a lot of the feedback I get, which also always makes me feel incredible, is that people will say, I listen to the show and I feel like Katie's a friend, which is the spirit that I want. I mean, I really believe in I'm taking things a little bit sideways here, but my daughter for many years went to a sleepaway camp, and their motto was they're an open circle. And that's sort of how I feel. I want to, like, everyone's pulled in, everyone's included. And I want the people who show up every week to listen to the show to feel that they are part of a conversation. They're not listening to a lecture. They're hanging out with two women that they would love to be drinking a cup of coffee with. That's the spirit of the show.
I see like the emotion. It's like a real feeling, right? This parasocial, and there's science that backs it up that I will send you studies. But truly, the parasocial relationship of podcasting to me is superpower. You can't get that from a newsletter, can't get that from social media posts. Hearing your very unique voice and the way you pronounce certain okay. Hearing your very unique voice and the way you pronounce certain words, it's just, you're clearly a real human. It's so great.
Can I tell you a funny story?
Yeah.
I follow Scott Galloway. I read his newsletter, honestly, more than I do the other stuff. But I've had the pleasure, and he's got a great newsletter. But I've had the pleasure of hearing him speak at public events. And he shared a story of how whenever he's walking down the street and somebody greets him like Scott, and they're so excited to see him, he knows they're a podcast listener because they feel like they know him. Whereas his newsletter readers don't have that same like, oh my gosh, we're friends kind of feeling. So I love that you shared that. And send me those studies.
Audible did a study about, the short version is they wired people's brains up and had them watch an action movie and then have them listen to an audiobook, similar podcast, the science applies. And the way their brains lit up was an order of magnitude more with the listening, not with their eyes. Another guest I had on spoke about audio as the imagination engine, where you're feeling that intimacy, filling in and making you into the friend that we need. So Katie, the podcast host, becomes that 50-something friend that we maybe don't have in our lives and we need. And she's smarter than us because, let's face it, she's doing her research and is just a very well-read human. But that's the thing, she's a human and she feels like our friend. I love it.
Podcasting is a very intimate medium.
It really is. Okay, so I wanted to talk more about guests because we just danced around it. And I think about the mental load of a podcaster like I do the mental load of a mom and a parent and a wife. I recently heard a statistic from my friend Alex, who owns Podmatch, that there are 47 want-to-be guests for every one podcast host.
So how do you manage that? That alone seems like a full-time job.
Managing the pitches that come in is a lot. Here are a couple things that I look for in a guest, just as a starting point. I want somebody who is bringing a perspective that's unique to the show. For example, I've done, I think, about 100 episodes on menopause. So I get a lot of people pitching me to be on menopause, but we've covered a lot of the things. So it needs to be a slightly fresh angle every time because a lot of my listening audience has been with me the entire time. They don't want to keep hearing the new things. So if somebody wants to be a guest, they need to make sure that they're bringing a unique angle to the conversation that's not just a retread of stuff that's before. So you have to do your homework before you pitch a show. 2, I want somebody who's a great storyteller. I love having authors because authors are great storytellers. And so they are terrific guests. They deeply know what it is that they're talking about. They've created an entire book, so they've really synthesized it. And authors make great guests too because they really need to work hard to sell their books in today's modern media fragmented economy. So they are willing and able to come up and be on the show. My guest this week is Dr. Amy Shaw, who just hit the #3 spot on the New York Times bestseller list. Her team pitched me in October.
Wow.
I recorded with her early and they asked me to hold it till this week, which I did. So even New York Times bestselling authors have to put the work in to get there. So that's a tip.
I love that you're deliberate and you have filters, but it still sounds so very manual.
It's very manual. And some people are great. They have like screeners and they do all this different stuff. And I just don't have the bandwidth. I actually had a great guest on the show who told me when she was on another podcast that she had to do a chemistry call beforehand where they had to get together with a producer on the show and figure out if it was a good fit. And I'm like, I don't have time for that. I do pre-calls with my guests. So every time I have a guest, we'll do a quick 15-minute pre-call. I do not like to make it long because if we have a long conversation, sometimes those topics don't come up again on the show because people feel like they're a dinner party guest. They don't want to repeat their stories. And I always say, feel free to repeat, act like we've never had this conversation. But that's hard to do. So I keep it really tight. We cover the 3 broad areas that we're going to talk on. My show runs 35 to 50 minutes at the most. So that goes very quickly. So we have to have broad areas that we're going to cover and agree on in advance. I always, if I haven't had a chance to do that pre-call before I maybe book or commit to a guest, I always make sure I can hear audio of them somewhere on the internet because sometimes people are not great public speakers. Sometimes people have a voice that's, difficult to listen to for a 50-minute show. So you have to do a little bit of homework and figure out, are they going to be easy on the ear for your listening audience for a period of time? And another screener for me is, it's not always a hard no, but for me, it's a red flag. If people want the questions in advance, that's a problem. Because if they're not able, in my book, and I'd love to hear what you think about this because you have done multiple podcasts and have a lot of good opinions on this. But if somebody can't talk about their area of expertise in their own story without pre-prompts, it gives me pause. They're not going to be great behind a mic. They are going to open their mouth and not close it for 15 minutes. They're not going to, there's no back and forth. So that's another screener for me.
Or they're going to open it and it's going to be while reading a thing with every perfect word in advance, right? So there's 2 things about you have a journalism background. I went to Columbia Journalism School and they hammer home all these certain diktats that you do not deviate from. And one of them is you do not let your source have the questions in advance. We're not Woodward and Bernstein solving Watergate. We are trying to make our guests deliver information. You don't want them to come over prepared. And it's something I went through with a big tech industry client. They were often not native English speakers, and so they would be anxious about how they were going to pronounce certain words. And I'd have to remind them, we can fix it. Just my view on doing the questions in advance.
Yeah, absolutely. I never do the questions in advance. It's been 270 shows. I made an exception once. And that was because I was interviewing an admiral in the Navy.
Wow.
And she's a former helicopter pilot. She was an admiral. She was chief of staff of our European theater. And in order to get her booked on the show, there was a whole protocol I had to go through with their comms team. The questions had to be approved in advance. And I agreed to that because it was just a very unique interview that was not going to happen without us agreeing what we were going to be talking about. So would I do it again to have that interview with her? Of course, because it was unique. But I would say for the most part, you got to come in being ready to rock and roll.
Love it. Okay, I'm going to jump into my rapid fire questions that I ask all of the time so I can get a range of people's perspectives on this. Ready for these? What is a podcast you recommend to people who say, I don't really listen to podcasts?
Well, lately I've been recommending Good Hang with Amy Poehler. I love the way she does it. I love also that she opens with a kind of micro interview with somebody that sets up the conversation. I think it's fun. And that show is actually giving me some ideas about the way I might reformat my own in the future.
Okay. AI in podcasting these are the fill in the blank.
AI in podcasting is useful.
The biggest opportunity in podcasting is
to sort of find the white space. There's so many conversations that are not being had, and there's plenty of room for people to jump in.
Sustainable podcasting looks like blank.
A color-coded Google Calendar.
Oh, I'm going to need to see a screenshot of that. The reason most podcasts fail is
it's so much work.
If podcasting disappeared tomorrow,
we would have to invent it in some other format. People love to listen. We've had oral storytelling for as long as we've had people.
I love it. I think that's a great note to end on. Katie Fogarty, if we were going to point
our listeners to one thing, since you do so much, what would it be?
Come hang out with me on Instagram at A Certain Age Pod.
We will do that. I just followed you last night. You have good search. It came up very easily. So thank you so much, Katie. Adore you.
Courtney, this was a total blast. I love hanging out with podcasters. And if anyone is listening and who jumps in and starts their show, please DM me. I would love to follow you. I'd love to support you. And I'd love to listen into what you are creating.
You're the best. Thank you so much.
Something I deeply appreciated about this conversation with Katie Fogarty was her honesty about the real work that is podcasting. Behind every episode is an invisible stack of effort, the research, the outreach to guests, the saying no to guests, the saying yes, the preparation, the editing, the promotion. It is so easy to underestimate how much goes into sustaining a show and making one that really resonates with your audience. But Katie also reminded me of something that's just as important. Podcasting really gives back. It creates connection, it builds community, it opens doors you might not have been able to open otherwise. I'm telling you, people love to be a guest on a podcast. I truly encourage you, if you're looking for a way to grow your network, your visibility, your thought leadership, even though I am exhausted AF, I wouldn't change a thing. I love having a podcast. I love having you as a listener. So if there's a lesson here, it might be this. You do not have to do podcasting perfectly. And yes, this is a Dr. Heal Thyself moment. You just have to keep going. A sustainable rhythm will always outperform a perfect plan that never comes to fruition. So if you enjoyed this conversation and you're thinking about building a show, or you have a show and you're trying to figure out what it takes to make it sustainable over the long haul, that's exactly the kind of work we do in my podcast accelerator communities. I'm launching one for experienced podcasters who might be feeling ready to succumb to pod fade, and for podcasters who are not yet podcasters but would like to be. You can find out more about that at soundsgreatstrategy.com. But also, please drop me an email with the thing that's holding you back from forward momentum on the show you were meant to make. You can reach me at Courtney@soundsgreatstrategy.com. That's Courtney@soundsgreatstrategy.com. I did receive several emails from you guys, and let me tell you, I'm not sure I would have beat the odds and made it past episode 3 if it weren't for you and your messages and your encouragement. So thank you. Keep them coming. I look forward to speaking with and to you on the next episode of Talking the Talk, a podcast about podcasting. Thanks for listening.